So next we'll move to the school police officer, SPO. First reading at the October 15th, 2019 board meeting. There was a revision to the board policy for the school police officer, and that was approved. And that revision was recommended due to a law change in June 2019 that removed the power of arrest from school police officers. On November 27th, 2019, Governor Wolf signed Act 91 into law, which would restore the power of arrest.
So not much to add to that. In essence, we needed to change, recommend a change to the board policy earlier this school year because legislation had changed in Pennsylvania eliminating arrest powers. That apparently was done inadvertently as part of a larger bill. So the state legislators adjusted that change. In late fall, Governor Wolf signed the bill, and school police officers now have that power of arrest reinstated. So within this recommended change to the board policy, you'll see throughout the language, the same powers, just to reflect that school police officers now do have those same powers reinstated with regard to arrest. The other language adjustment that was recommended in working with the solicitor's office on this recommended revision was to just adjust the language with respect to the training requirements for school police officers to, instead of specifically identifying each and every training requirement, which may change anytime a law is passed, to just identify training requirements required by law to be all-inclusive.
A question. School police officers are not by law required to carry firearms, is that right?
They're not required by law to carry firearms.
So,
That's correct, right?
okay, because I have concerns about anybody carrying firearms in the schools. So I just want to be sure that there isn't a legal reason to not have to, for them to be carrying them.
There, and I want to make sure that for clarification purposes, there's a difference between our school resource officers. We have two school resource officers within one in the junior high school and one in the senior high school. Those officers are Abington police officers, and this policy is specific to our school police officer, to an Abington School District police officer, Mr. Steve Hockwin. We have one Abington School police officer. The Abington Township police officers, who are the SROs, they follow the requirements of being an SRO, and they are Abington police officers and follow the requirements of an Abington police officer. I just want to make that distinct. That
Do they also carry firearms?
they do carry firearms. They are a police officer within the building.
And what policy covers?
There is a memorandum of understanding between Abington School District and Abington Police Department, which has guidelines for the Abington police officers within the Abington School District buildings.
I mean, this may not be the appropriate venue or time to talk about this, but there's a lot of evidence that anybody carrying a firearm in a district building puts kids at risk, particularly students of color. We know that black and brown students are much more likely to be shot by police officers, especially school resource officers, than other students. And I have serious concerns about anybody in the buildings having firearms, regardless of whether or not they're police. So
What I can do is provide you with the, make sure that you have the memorandum of understanding and any policies that pertain to firearms within our school, and then also anything that governs the school police officer as well, and provide you with that information.
So This board has the power to decide if the school police officer can carry, but we don't have the power to decide if a school resource officer can carry. Is that why you made that distinction?
Yes, the school resource officer follows all guidelines by the Abington Township Police Department and all laws that are applicable to that police department. You have the ability to shape policy based on our school police officer. However, it is important to note that the approval for the school police officer to, just in general, goes through the Montgomery County Court of Common Pleas for that to happen, and this policy itself. So yes, there is a difference. In terms of legally, I do not think that we can dictate what an Abington Township police officer would whether they would carry or not carry within our schools. I believe that is part of our memorandum of understanding, but it is also part of our agreement to have an Abington Township police officer in our building.
Dr. Fetcher, do I understand correctly, though, that Abington, so in other words, the Abington police officer's presence in the schools and the fact that they carry firearms on them is part of the memorandum of understanding. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. So it's an agreement between the district and the township police.
It is an agreement. There are things within that memorandum of understanding that express when certain situations arise, who's responsible for what component of it, but they are an Abington Township police officer, and all the rules that apply to the Abington police officer, that we don't govern what those rules are.
They're not our employees, so, yeah.
Ken?
Go ahead, Ken.
To be clear, whether or not there are school resource officers is not covered by the Member of Understanding. The Member of Understanding, which is a very standard Member of Understanding, it lays out the ground rules for what police do and can't do in the schools, who will be with a student if they come to question them, all that stuff. It's a separate decision as to whether or not the district chooses and the township choose for the township to have school resource officers in the school buildings in the first place. That's not what the MOU says. It doesn't say you shall have policemen. It just says what you do with them when they're there. So it's the district police department joint decision whether to have them, how many, where to have them. But what they do is governed by a memorandum of understanding, which is pretty standard.
Okay, so, right. I guess what I'm trying to understand is part of that agreement, part of the parameters of that agreement, that if Abington police officers are in the schools, that they shall be armed.
That's a protocol of the Abington Police Department. To my understanding, they're not going to have a policeman assigned anywhere without a weapon. So it's not in the MOU doesn't say any school resource officer that's assigned to the district shall carry a gun, shall not, whatever.
Okay.
That's not covered by that memorandum of understanding. That memorandum of understanding says, as I said, it's protocols.
Right.
It's
So
up
it's
to
boilerplate language.
Yes, but it's my understanding that the township isn't going to put a police department, put a police officer, school resource officer in our buildings without a weapon. That's my understanding.
Okay. Have we asked?
I don't know.
They've been, from my understanding, they've been in our buildings for over 20 years. And at that point, and I could do research on this, that topic has come up, and it was a debate with the board at the time. And my understanding is that if an Abington police officer is in our buildings, they will be outfitted and armed how they are as a police officer, if we are interested in having Abington police officers in our building. That's my understanding, and it's definitely something I could pose the question to the chief of police, but I'm pretty sure that they would not be acting as Abington police officers without the parameters that surround them as police officers.
Our school resource officers, they're there for the full day?
Yes.
Each day? What are we doing to make sure that they are able to establish positive relationships with students and not, and the students see them in that light and not only a light where they're fixing a problem?
They run groups, they work in classes, they do presentations with the students. Often they do, when I say groups, they have projects that they work on, positive projects, similar to what you would find in a relationship with our DARE officers in an elementary school.
And also, our school police officer is a fully, is the right word, certified or licensed police officer in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, correct? So it's just, they work for us, not the township.
Correct.
Police officers also shoot people pretty regularly, so.
And having looked at this and thought about it, I would like more time to process and possibly bring it up at the next school board meeting,
But in terms of this policy,
just to get clarification.
yeah,
and
this
ask
is a
questions.
first reading of the policy, so we will have a second reading of the policy at the next meeting. And the interim, I will provide the documents that Dr. Kleiman, I mentioned Dr. Kleiman, that I would provide her with. I will provide the entire board with those documents. And I will also pose the question to the chief of police that if there's an SRO in the building, if an Abington police officer were to be stationed in the building, if there is any possibility for them or consideration for them to be armed or unarmed.
Yeah, I cannot, I hate to use the word lie, but I can't lie. This hits home really hard for me. I'm also interested in what has been the history of our resource officers with the students prior to this coming into play. As far as the positive de-escalating opposed to the opposite, what has been our success rate with that? Because guns does not make it automatically go down. So I'm interested in knowing what is the history of that. Okay. Any other questions or concerns? This is a roll call for the first reading of this, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Mrs. Doherty?
Mr. Allen?
Aye.
Dr. Kleiman?
Aye.
Mr. Kay?
Aye.
Mrs. O'Rourke? Aye. Mr. Scher?
Aye.
Dr. Mallory?
Aye.
Mr. McGarry?
Aye.
Mrs. Pickford? Aye. Mrs. Brown?
Aye. The ayes have it and the motion passes. Mrs. Pickford, can you please read the recommendation for the approval of the 2020-2021 school calendar?